became a career firefighter with the Howard County Department of Fire and Rescue Service, the chief of the medical division, or EMS, the unofficial historian of the Howard County Department of Fire and Rescue Services. Over 65,000 digital images and newspaper articles, magazine articles, etc. Episode 25-7, Ellicott City Volunteer Fire Department, 50's and 60's, by George. That's George Edward Massey. I've come across a bunch of images, Polaroids, etc. that Eddie Massey had taken over the years. Most of them will be from the 50's. Next several sessions, I will share these with you. The first image that we're looking at is just the receipt for the first ladder truck, hook and ladder truck purchased in Howard County by Ellicott City. It was an American LaFrance ladder chief, rear mount ladder, and back in late 60s, early 70s, actually on February 6, 1970, the check was cut. The total price for that piece of equipment was $61,784 for the first ladder truck of Howard County. Today, it's my understanding that potentially a ladder truck goes for anywhere from $1.25 to $1.5 million. I can remember back then because I was in the station the night it was delivered, and with the price tag, I thought it was just highway robbery. Little did I know that 50-some years later, what a deal that would be. This is just an image taken from the balcony of the Ellicott City Volunteer Fire Department back on March 30th, 1942. They'd had a historic snowstorm of about 2 feet of wet snow. This picture is just being taken from the balcony of Station 2. Of importance, if you look at the left-hand side, you'll see the gas station, Sinclair gas station, that was in operation then. Years later, that became the annex for the fire station in Ellicott City. Just an image of engine 22, an American LaFrance diesel engine. I believe this was the first diesel engine to be purchased in Howard County. In this gentleman to the left in the white coat is Chief Harrison Shipley, and the gentleman to the right is Freddie Richards. The 100th year anniversary of the Ellicott City Volunteer Firemen's Association was July 9th, 1988. Quite a festive occasion. Martin's West, and you can see the program, the board of directors that were in place at that time. This is just showing the active department, both the active department of volunteers for both the Ellicott City and the Bethany station, and then also the career personnel that were assigned to stations 2 and 8 on that particular date. And the ladies auxiliary, there's no volunteer fire department out there that's worth their salt that does not have a ladies auxiliary, and this is certainly the active folks that were there at that particular time. But we're looking at, I believe this is 1962 Pontiac Superior ambulance 25, that was placed in service. This replaced the DeSoto ambulance that we've seen in some previous pictures. Of note with this picture is to the left, you see some of the buildings of Fells Lane back in the day. Fells Lane ran right alongside the parking lot there. So you can see the buildings on Fells Lane, and I believe there in the back of the ambulance, you can see some more buildings. I think there was some sort of small manufacturing company that occupied that one larger building. Hank Ash was one of the individuals that survived the crash of the chimney that killed 2 firefighters, Ditch and Stigler, back on December 25th, 1953. He survived the chimney falling down. The helmet he's holding was pretty much crushed, and I believe he was wearing that at that time, and he was very fortunate to have escaped. This is just an article about that particular evening, about that particular individual, Hank Ash, and how he survived that tremendous loss of that chimney collapsing, killing 2 firefighters and injuring several others. Al Massey being one, and Hank Ash being the other. This is just a continuation of the article about Hank Ash, also talking about the collapse of the chimney that Christmas Eve back in 1953, holding a helmet that he was wearing. I'm just quoting one paragraph here. He was taken to St. Agnes Hospital, and quoting the article, it says, "At St. Agnes Hospital, 2 doctors and a nurse strained to pry the metal helmet from Hank's head. The staff worked 22 days to put him back together. He was one of the lucky ones." So he's transported to the hospital with the crushed helmet. still in his head. And once he's at the hospital staff there were able to remove the helmet from his head. Another article from another paper outlining the sort of the day in the life of the volunteer fire department, about their activities, responses, etc. This particular image is just showing that fire siren kicked in. The volunteers would run to the station and don their equipment and respond to the emergency. This is just showing one of the volunteers, Bobby Cross, running into the station and get ready to hop on the apparatus. You can also stop these particular podcasts and take a moment or two to read the article if you care. Continuation of that particular article, the image to the left is just showing that back in the early 60s, they had career people as paid drivers. Image on the left is one of those drivers, George Edward Massey, who donated all these articles that we're looking at today. He's driving engine 24, the open cab American LaFrance engine. And then on the right-hand side are two individuals in the ambulance running on the call. And we see on the left Howard Massey, Eddie's brother, and on the right, Vernon Mullenix, responding to the call. No emergency services can really effectively be run and dispatched without a central alarm, central communications, and this was just that back in the day. This picture was taken back on December 30th, 1962, just showing the central alarm, as it was known. This is actually an office space over top of the Howard County Jail and remained there for quite a few years. In this picture, we do see at the radio, Bill Boyd at the radio putting out a call or whatever. But these were the cramped quarters of the original communication center, central alarm for Howard County. It pales in comparison to the modern communication center that we now have today. 1950 Orn fire engine was utilized for about 14 years. This particular picture is taken in 1955. And the engine was poised on Rogers Avenue. In this particular picture, 3 personnel are standing in front of engine 24, an American LaFrance engine. Picture was taken in 1955. Standing in front, left to right, are Charles Mellon, center Eddie Massey, and on the right is Woody Collette. And again, this picture is taken on Lower Rogers Avenue. Again, the same location on Rogers Avenue, standing in front of the 1959 Orn fire truck is Charles Klein Sr., the patriarch of the Klein family that had quite a few active volunteers that were instrumental in the organization of the Ellicott City Volunteer Fire Department. Standing on the right-hand side, I believe, is Freddie Richards. And again, this is taken on Rogers Avenue, down near Frederick Road. Just a side view of the 1959 Orn fire truck. And again, this is taken on Rogers Avenue. Picture that's been circulated quite a bit, but this is April 1957, the corner of Main Street and Columbia Pike. Students are waiting to catch the bus, go to school, staying in front of the Ellicott City Theater, as you can see. And also looking at this, it looked like the cool style was to be wearing these leather jackets. This is just a picture of a fire on College Avenue. The Reverend Robert Mitchell, who was the chaplain for the department, is featured there. Just a 1959 Orn fire engine parked next to the building. I believe this is labeled as engine 22 for its duration from 1959 to approximately 1962, 63 or so. Again, a picture of one of the original fire engines parked on the side of the fire station. Behind the steering wheel is Freddie Richards, who was a key member of the department for many years. Also of importance, as we look at this picture, take a look at the Sinclair gas station that's catty-corner across the street from the main station. That's the gas station that was in place for quite a few years, and eventually in the 60s, mid-60s, the Howard County Fire Department through Ellicott City purchased that building, and that became the annex for the Ellicott City Fire Station, where additional equipment was kept on the other side, ambulances, rescue squad, brush units, etc. In this particular picture, Bill Klein is sitting behind the steering wheel of the particular engine. Looks like engine 23, as it was back in the day. This is around 1965 or so. Again, you can see the gas station across the street, and behind the fire engine, you can see where there were structures on Main Street, wooden structures, homes that were there, again, in the 60s. Those were eventually taken down in the late 60s, 70 or so. But those buildings were still there when I first started as a volunteer back in 1968. Just an image of an article talking about, I guess, ambulance abuse or whatever. Of significance with this picture is Eddie Massey, who was one of the career firefighters, is being photographed utilizing the stair chair that's neatly tucked away underneath the side of the ambulance, ambulance 25. The other fire engine that was unique was engine 21. This was purchased in the early 60s in American France. This was a gasoline powered engine, 5-speed split rear unit that I had difficulties for different reasons driving. The other unit that we saw earlier, engine 22, was a diesel engine, the first diesel engine purchased in Howard County that I could drive with ease. This was a little more challenging. Freddie Richards pictured in the downstairs radio room, and Arthur Bear, also in May of 1957, having a picture taken in the fire station. In May of 1957, just walking out of the fire station to sit on the chair out in front of the fire station is Eddie Massey with his stylish hat that he's wearing. And just coming out the door behind him is Bobby Cross. Just an image of another piece of apparatus, engine 23, Ford Chevrolet, 250-gallon per minute pump. This was used as a more or less a brush unit back in the day, at least when I got in the fire department in 1968. This was the first piece out the building on brush fire. An article discussing the Ellicott City Volunteer Fire Department in a newspaper or pamphlet called The Heritage, and there are 2 different pages that cover the Ellicott City Volunteer Fire Department. A great tradition of those in the fire service, especially on warm evenings, was to sit out in front of the fire station watching the cars go by, having people stop by looking for directions. You'd be walking the fire station, talking with the locals. In this particular picture, you see several firefighters sitting out in front of the fire station with the old bay doors. These were spring-loaded doors. Once the latch was released inside the building, those 2 doors would swing open and apparatus would respond. So those were the early doors that were used in the fire station. Sitting there in the chairs, left to right, are Al Bear, Freddie Richards, and Bobby Cross. As I said, I guess the tradition is that the firefighters like to sit outside the fire station, especially in warm weather. Some 25, almost 30 years later, the tradition is alive and well. Doors have changed, but firefighters still like lounging out in front of the fire station. I see Yogi sitting there also, and personnel were able to greet and chat with the locals, walking up and down Main Street, giving directions, and enjoying an evening, waiting for our fire call to come in. Sitting here this particular evening, left to right, are Wayne Gardner, Mike Dorsey, Mark Richards, and Jimmy Massey sitting in front of the fire station. This image is taken on Frederick Road, just south of Charlie Miller's farm. Up in the upper left is Frederick Road. As it's approaching to the left, Fawn Hill Drive, the firefighters on this particular day were having a training drill utilizing foam to suppress fires that were set. Actually, the fires were set by pouring gasoline and oil into the creek there and lighting it off, and then the firefighters would use the foam to suppress the flames in the fire. Apparently, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, was not active at that time, and I guess the folks really didn't care what happened to the residual runoff down below. But this was an active training session utilizing foam back in the day.
Please use your remaining heartbeats wisely and not waste a single precious one.